Kido is the unsung hero of Bleach. It's a genuinely awesome and fascinating aspect of the world, but it goes criminally underexplored, both in-universe and outside of it. I've been wanting to do a video tackling the wide world of Shinigami spells for some time now, so I figured the best place to begin was with a comprehensive breakdown of every single one of the demon arts that we see in the source material. I'm not quite sure what I've got myself in for here, but let's crack on with it. But first, what is Kido? As one of the 4 Shinigami combat arts, Kido is an essential part of a Shinigami's arsenal. By utilising the rare Ryoku around them, Shinigami are able to conjure spells and abilities capable of a wide array of effects, both offensive and defensive. And some go even beyond that, twisting and warping reality as we know it. In a sense, Kido is the Shinigami officer's spellbook, a gateway into a world of magic that's only ever really tangentially touched upon in the story. The Soul Society has a branch dedicated to the study and usage of Kido, the Kido core, but they're mostly shrouded in mystery, often only appearing for ceremonial purposes. There are 2 main types of Kido spell: Hado for offensive damaging spells, and Bakudo for defensive and overall support. These categories can then be further broken down. Hado spells include extremely rare and dangerous sacrificial and secret spells, while Bakudo magic often takes the form of bindings, barriers, shields, and the like. In the deepest recesses of Kido knowledge and mastery, you can also find forbidden spells, the usage of which earns a Shinigami a life sentence in prison. There is a 3rd branch of Kido too, called Kaido, which revolves around dedicated healing spells, though this isn't given anywhere near the same kind of depth as the other 2 categories. Kido are numbered for their strength and potency, ranging from 1 as the weakest to 99 being the overall strongest or most effective. Kido can be activated with an incantation chant or without one by more skilled practitioners, though that often reduces the overall power and efficiency of the spell. In the source material, some of the characters that use Kido the most include Kisuke Urahara, Tessai Tsukubishi, Sosuke Aizen, Hachigen Ushoda, Byakuya Kuchiki, Rukia Kuchiki, and Hinamori Momo, just to name a few. When it came to making this video, I deliberated over how best to present it. I thought about just doing a straight up numerical list of every spell, but came to the conclusion that might be a little boring. So instead, like we did with our video looking at every bankai in Bleach, I've separated them by arc. We'll be charting every instance a spell is first used and seeing which arc has the highest number of new Kido spells by the end. Obviously that means the 1000-Year Blood War arc is probably going to lose out, but it's just a bit of additional fun, and that arc won in the Bankai video anyway, so now it's time to give another arc a chance to shine. So we'll be taking a look at all named and numbered Hado and Bakudo that appear in the source material, as well as many spells that were never given a numbered classification, but were at least named in the subsequent databooks. So let's begin our exhaustive breakdown of every Kido that appears in the source material. I'm probably going to miss one somewhere, but we'll try our best. Before we get started on the video, guys, if you haven't hit subscribe yet, make sure to do that now for more Bleach content like this every single week. Or maybe not quite like this, as that would take me forever. But if you enjoyed the video, when you're done with it, make sure to give it a thumbs up as well to help support me and the channel. And if you want to take that support from me another step further, I do also have a Patreon as well. And as always, an enormous shout out and a massive thank you goes out to everyone supporting me over there on Patreon. As always, I really do appreciate each and every one of you. And yes, there will be spoilers for the 1000-Year Blood War arc of Bleach in the video to come. We'll be starting things off with Bakudo, the supportive and defensive spells, and we see an absolute ton of these throughout the story. Beginning, of course, with the Agent of the Shinigami arc. The very first Kido spell we see in Bleach is fittingly found in Chapter 1, and even more fittingly, it's Bakudo number 1, Sai. Rukia uses the spell to lock Ichigo's arms behind his back, but much to her surprise, he manages to break the Kido with pure brute force a few moments later. The next one is already a little strange. It really didn't take us very long to find a slightly dubious one, but in Chapter 21, as Ichigo is captured by Grand Fisher, Rukia attempts to cast Bakudo number 9, Geki, but Ichigo prevents her from doing so. This spell is never used again in the source material, so we never truly see it, but in the anime, we actually get to see the spell used against the Hollow, so already maybe this one shouldn't count, but we know from the anime what the spell would have done. It would have encased Grand Fisher in red light, paralysing him. Surprisingly, the next Bakudo we see in the Agent of the Shinigami arc takes us right the way to the very top of the hierarchy. In Chapter 61, Tessai Tsukubishi, who would later be revealed to be the former Kido Corps captain, uses the strongest numbered Bakudo we ever see, Bakudo 99 Part 1, Kin, in an attempt to restrain Ichigo during his Shattered Shaft training. The spell binds the target's arms behind their back, sealing them in place with bands which are then locked down by metal bars. A few chapters later, in Chapter 64, Tessai uses Bakudo 99 Part 2, Bankin, which is a 3-stage spell designed to permanently trap the target. The first stage, Prologue, cocoons the target in a white fabric, almost mummifying them. The second stage, Refrain, then impales the target with ornate bolts, before the final stage, Finale, crushes the target beneath a colossal metal cube that is dropped on them from above. However, Ichigo was able to break free of the first 2 stages, allowing him to disrupt the spell before being smashed by the block of metal. Now, our first spell without a number comes in the Agent of the Shinigami arc in Chapter 48, when Urahara uses a Bakudo called Shiberyubi to freeze Rukia's entire body and prevent her from interfering with Ichigo's fight against the Menos Grande. So, considering the Agent of the Shinigami arc doesn't really have that many Shinigami in it at all, I think it does pretty well in terms of its debuting of numerous Kido. Moving on to the Soul Society arc, and a fair few Bakudo actually have their debut here. Bakudo 58 is a very unique spell in that its power is purely supportive. Kakushi Suijaku enables the user to locate a target across a massive area. The example we see shows Isane Kotetsu using the spell to discover the coordinates of Aizen and Gin after they flee across the Soul Society. Bakudo 61 Rikujōkōrō is one of the most famous Kido spells in Bleach, and it definitely gets a lot of screen time comparatively. Once the spell is activated, usually by simply pointing a finger, a blast of yellow light strikes the target, instantly immobilizing them by then pinning them with 6 bars of golden light from all angles, surrounding the target in a star-shaped formation. As a tangible magical spell, the bars of Rikujōkōrō can be shattered and snapped off by the victim if they're strong enough to break free. If the victim is already under the controlling influence of a Kido-like spell, like when Rukia was being manipulated by Zomari's Amour, Rikujōkōrō will be able to prevent their movements. Tentei Kura Bakudo 77 is another really cool support spell. Once the practitioner has drawn a series of intricate symbols on their arms, hands, and the ground beneath them, they then throw their hands forward to generate a glowing box of light. After the user then performs a string of delicate hand movements, a network of branch-like energy spreads from the box, enabling the user to mentally communicate with anyone they choose in a given proximity. By enabling the caster to speak with multiple allies at once from anywhere on a battlefield, Tentei Kura is absolutely essential for conveying information and is a vital and powerful spell to know. Hakufuku is the first spell debuting in the Soul Society arc that doesn't have a number assigned to it. The target sees a flash of white light before their eyes, which instantly knocks them unconscious. The last spell debuting in the Soul Society arc is another strange one in that it's never really seen, only explained. It's said by Izuru that Hitsugaya constructed a Kyomon spell around Hinamori's cell. Kyomon is a mirrored force field that deflects attacks from the outside. Now, while it doesn't have a numbered classification, Izuru does mention that it's a high-level spell. So that's a decent number of Bakudo debuting in the Soul Society arc for the first time, but I have a feeling the Arrancar arc might be about to outdo it. Now, like we did with the Bankai video, we'll be splitting both the Arrancar arc and the Thousand Year Blood War arc up into their individual sub-arcs. So we kickstart the Arrancar arc with the White Invasion sub-arc. And our first new Bakudo is Bakudo 75 Gochu Tekkan, a powerful spell designed to trap a single target. By clasping their hands together, the user generates 5 orbs of light, which are then slammed into the ground in front of them. And then, from the sky above, 5 enormous pillars of metal connected by chains come crashing down onto the target, locking them in place. And just like that, we're already done with the numbered Bakudo debuting in the White Invasion section of the story, but there is a few more to discuss. In chapter 217, Shinji leaps down in front of Ichigo before thrusting his hand in front of his face, activating a spell called Tanma Otoshi. Ichigo sees a bright light and a rush of energy, before promptly being knocked out. And then in chapter 224, Yamamoto uses a spell called Inamuri to quickly put Hinamori into a dazed state after she rapidly spirals out of control mentally, simply by placing his hand in front of her face. And afterwards, she quickly falls unconscious. Now, this does seem to be very similar to Tanma Otoshi in my opinion, except maybe not quite as abrupt. In the very next chapter, 225, Hachigen creates an incredible barrier to conceal the Vizard's training chamber from the outside world. Whatever lies within the realm of Hachigyo Sogai is erased from existence entirely, and even removes it from an outsider's perception and consciousness, meaning people walking past won't even think to notice it. Considering what we know about Kido that involved time and space manipulation, I have to assume this would be considered forbidden. Moving into the Hueco Mundo arc, up next is a nice and simple spell, Bakudo 4 Hainawa. The caster creates a rope of lightning-like energy which coils itself around the target's arms and bodies, binding them in place. And then we have Bakudo 81 Danku, another very famous spell in the series, I'd say. Upon activation, Danku instantly summons a glossy glass-like wall that can block all Kido-based attacks with a power level ranging from 1 to 89, which is pretty incredible. This is proven when Aizen uses Danku to defend himself from Tessai's Hado 88, Hiryu Gekizoku Shinten Raiho. The fact that this one spell can essentially nullify every single Kido from 1 through to 89 does seem kind of crazy to me, as long as you're skilled enough to know Danku, you don't really need to know many other Bakudo whatsoever. And then we do actually get a fair few Kido debuting in the Turn Back the Pendulum arc, starting with Bakudo 26, Kyoko, which hides the user from sight and perception by bending light around them. And then in chapter -101, by raising their hand and then closing it into a fist, a Kido user can activate Bakudo 63, Sajo Sabaku, which takes the form of a thick rope of energy. The rope then binds the target with such power, constricting them like an enormous snake, that Hachi believes physical strength alone shouldn't be able to break it, though naturally he's fairly quickly proven wrong. And so now we move on to the fake Karakura town part of the Arrancar arc, and this was always going to be a big one. And where Bakudo is concerned, there's absolutely tons on display here, as of course this is the big final battle, the ultimate showdown as far as the Arrancar arc goes. And I'm also going to tell you now that unequivocally this one is the winner in terms of the amount of new Bakudo we get to see. There's just absolutely loads on show here. But we're starting things off with another simple one, Bakudo 8 Seki, which debuts in chapter 336. The caster generates a small orb of light, which simply repels whatever strikes it. Then we have Bakudo 21 Sekienton, which sees the user place their palms on the ground as red smoke bursts forth, engulfing them and providing them with a smoke screen for an escape. Amida claims to not be very good at using Kido, so I wonder if this was everything it could do, or if he was even using it correctly, though based on the translation of the name, it seems pretty right to me. For Bakudo 30 Shitotsu Sansen, upon generating a burst of yellow energy in their hand, the caster uses that energy to then draw a triangle of power in front of them. From that triangle, yellow spikes of fang-shaped energy appear on the tips of the shape itself before being fired towards the target, pinning them in 3 distinct places. Bakudo 37 Suriboshi, which debuts in chapter 336, summons a bright ball of blue light which then fires out 6 ropes capable of latching onto the nearby surroundings. The light then seemingly cools, transforming and hardening into an elastic-like goo, which acts as a cushion for catching falling targets. And then up next we have another shield spell, Bakudo 39 Enkosen, which conjures a spinning disc of yellow light, capable of blocking an enemy's attack. Depending on the strength of the enemy, however, the disc will shatter into shimmering pieces on impact. Hyaporankan is another Kido spell I feel like we've seen used quite a lot. It's funny how some of these really do stand out to me as very familiar faces as opposed to the rest. Bakudo 62, this spell involves conjuring a glowing rod of energy in the user's hand before they launch it at their target. And as it soars through the air, the rod then separates into 100 more rods, which then rain down upon the enemy, pinning them against the surface. However, a more experienced Kido user like Ichibei Hyosabe can simply summon the rod in midair and then sling an entire string of them at the opponent effortlessly. Bakudo 73 Tozansho summons a barrier in the shape of a crystalline blue inverted pyramid around the wielder. In the Fake Karakura Town arc, we see Izuru combine it with Hinamori's own Suriboshi from earlier. And then finally, Bakudo 79 Kuyo Shibari looks really cool in my opinion. 8 spheres of what seem to be pure, inky black darkness surround the intended target before a 9th and final sphere appears in the centre of the target's chest, locking them into place. Now, that's it for the numbered Bakudo of the Fake Karakura Town battle. However, there are plenty more spells being used throughout the final fight of the Arrancar arc, most of which come courtesy of Hachi, so let's take a look. The first spell without a number debuts in chapter 368 and is Hachi's Roppo Fujin, an emerald green barrier that he tries to seal Baragon in. The spell combines 2 3-dimensional crosses together, imprisoning the target in the centre. And Roppo Fujin was the example that Kubo used to show us that Kido isn't ageless. Many of us actually went into that Hachi versus Baragon fight thinking that Hachi was the perfect counter to Baragon's Respirar, and Kubo quickly flipped that on its head. And of course, speaking of Hachi, during his battle with Baragon, Hachi combines 4 different powerful Bakudo seals together to try and lock the Espada away. The first is Ryubi no Jomon, which conjures an enormous set of white pillars together to form a massive shield. Hachi actually performs something rather interesting with this ability in that he uses the Kido first, then applies its incantation afterwards to try and strengthen the spell. I actually think that's very cool, and it kind of shows Hachi's prowess, his ability to think on his feet when it comes to using Kido, because it basically means you can get the Kido spell out there very quickly if you absolutely have to, if you're against the clock for whatever reason. Like with Baragon, if they didn't have some kind of shield, they would have died, and then you can spend time bolstering its strength afterwards. The second gate seal that Hachi summons is Koko no Jomon, which takes the form of an ornate water wheel with a great door in the centre, which can be opened to allow attacks in from the outside. The third gate that Hachi creates is Kigai no Jomon. Summoning a plethora of glittering hexagonal shards, they all come together, tessellating to form a solid wall structure. And the fourth and final gate that Hachi summons is Hueco no Jomon, which delivers a towering obelisk flanked by enormous wings. The wings are born out of a ring of fire, and once completed they fold inwards in the appearance of a massive bird. When all 4 gateways have been created, Hachi combines them to build a new almighty Bakudo, Shiju no Saimon, which traps Baragon inside. Once the gateways have been built, a rectangular barrier forms around them, connecting the different gates, completing a powerful prison that was strong enough to withstand Soifon's Jakuho Raikoben at close range. What's really cool is that these 4 gateways each correspond to the 4 symbols of Chinese mythology, the animal guardians of the 4 cardinal directions, which even appear among Chinese constellations. The animals themselves are the black tortoise of the north, the azure dragon of the east, the vermilion bird of the south, and the white tiger of the west. Yet another spell being used by Hachi is Hako Okuri, which enables him to seal an object inside a barrier and then transport that barrier wherever he likes. We see he's able to do this even with his own arm, severing it from his body with the barrier, and he can then move the barrier inside even another being if he so chooses. Considering this seems akin to moving space itself, I wonder if this would be considered forbidden. Finally, moving away from Hachi, Milon Escudo is a bright green hexagonal energy barrier devised by Aizen, capable of blocking a point-blank Getsuga Tensho from Ichigo in Bankai. The barrier initially appears invisible before expanding rapidly to block the attack, and then shrinking back again before disappearing into nothingness. El Escudo is another spell used by Aizen where he raises his arm to summon a thin, lime green barrier capable of blocking a strike from Kyoraku in Shikai. It's a very cool little detail that both of the spells used by Aizen are in the language of the Arrancar, keeping their Spanish motif of course, and therefore I assume he created them, since he hasn't renamed any other Kido spells he later uses. Moving on, in a display of how dangerous Kisuke truly is in chapter 402, the Bakudo spell Fusatsu Kake is designed to seal the Reiatsu vents of a Shinigami. All Shinigamis subconsciously leak Reiatsu from their wrists at all times. Kisuke's seal summons golden rings which affix themselves around the enemy's wrists, blocking those vents and therefore incinerating the Shinigami from the inside out with their own Reiatsu. It's a gruesome way to go, but what's even more terrifying is that Kisuke has something ready-made to pretty much take down any Shinigami. And this does seem to be a surefire way to kill just about anyone in the Gotei, as Aizen himself even admits that had he not fused with the Hogyoku, the fight would already be over. And finally, for the fake Karakura town arc, we have Kyujuroke Kakafumetsu, a special Bakudo seal created by Kisuke for use specifically against none other than Aizen himself, who at this point had grown too powerful to simply defeat in battle. When the target is sufficiently weakened, the spell activates from inside their body. Several bright red lights burst out of the target's chest, running down their torso in a column, punctuating them before transforming into crucifixes of energy. As more of these crosses emerge from the target's body, the seal begins to close around them, wrapping them in a brilliant red shell before they're bound completely inside one giant cross. So that was quite a lot of brand new Bakudo debuting in the fake Karakura town arc, but to be honest, I wouldn't have it any other way. Like I said, it's a big battle and it's time to finally unleash the Kido, especially when Hachi is involved. After the fake Karakura town, however, that's it for brand new Bakudo until the second Quincy invasion. There's no new Bakudo in the Lost Agent arc or the first Quincy invasion. The brand new Bakudo appears when Nanao unveils her own bespoke spell that she devised for battle against the Quincy, Hakudan Kepeki, which is in chapter 551. Hakudan Kepeki is a golden barrier that stretches across an undetermined distance. Emblazoned upon the barrier is the insignia of the Kido Corps, combined with the emblem of the 1st Division. Using traces of Quincy Reiatsu left over from the first invasion, Nanao created a barrier that temporarily shuts out Quincy from entering. Later, after Haschwolf destroys the first barrier, Nanao summons a second unnamed barrier in chapter 559, this time made out of hexagonal tiles. Although the barrier appears more fragile than the first to Haschwolf, he also suspects that a trap lies within it. It's unclear if the barrier itself is dangerous or if Nanao concealed another Kido within. But that's it for Bakudo debuts in the source material. There's a lot of them, presenting a wide range of creative and colourful powers. But now it's time to move on to the more deadly Kido spells, the offensive Hado magic. And of course, we're starting things off again with the Agent of the Shinigami arc, with another Kido that's actually quite familiar to us even as the series progresses, this time being Hado 4, Byakurai. Rukia blasts a hollow with a strike of blue energy with little impact. But we see the spell used by Byakuya later on in a more effective light a couple of times, where he fires a concentrated bolt of blue energy from his fingertip, sniping his opponent. Another Hado spell that's often shared between the Kuchiki siblings is Hado 33 Sokatsui. Initially used by Rukia as she fires a generic blast at the hollow Shrieker, Sokatsui is later redefined as a blast of blue flame. So, not too many Hado debuting in the Agent of the Shinigami arc, but as we move on, I have a feeling it's going to build and build per the arcs. And so moving on to the Soul Society arc, we have arguably one of, if not the most famous Kido in the series, Hado 31 Shaka Ho, which much like Sokatsui before it, simply fires an explosive blast of crimson flame at a target. It can be used in creative ways too, as we see Renji charging it at point-blank range when holding on to Xyloporo's clothes. Although it's only used a few times in the source material, Shakaho was a go-to spell in anime filler, and as such it's received a lot of prominence over the years. Hado 63 Rikujōkōrō unleashes a torrent of thunderous lightning at the enemy. The attack can be charged first in the hand as an orb of crackling power, before being released, taking the form of a lightning bolt descending from the sky. Now, perhaps my favourite spell on the list is Hado number 90, Kurohitsugi, Aizen's signature move. We've seen this spell used at varying degrees of capability. In the Soul Society arc where it debuts, Aizen activates the spell without its incantation, and as a result it only has a third of its true power. Kurohitsugi forms a dense, shadowy coffin of energy around the target before impaling them with a multitude of sinister black spears that pierce the coffin from the outside. The coffin itself then vanishes, leaving the lacerated victim to collapse to the ground. However, that's just the weaker version. In the final battle of the Arrancar arc, we see Aizen utilise the spell once again, only this time he recites the full incantation, thereby releasing the spell at its maximum strength. Upon activation, the fully powered Kurohitsugi imprisons the target in a truly massive coffin of black energy, quaking the area around it with a crushing torrent of gravity, supposedly capable of distorting time and space itself, before it violently shatters in a colossal explosion of pure power. Though we don't get to see the outcome of the spell during the Arrancar arc, we do get to see it in the 1000-Year Blood War, where Aizen uses what I believe to be the fully powered spell without an incantation to annihilate the Soul King's Reiatsu and the entire surrounding area, showing how truly powerful he's become. And the reason why I think it's fully powered even without an incantation is fairly simple. It looks considerably more like the one used in the Arrancar arc than the one used in the Soul Society arc, plus narratively, it just makes sense for Aizen's growth. Initially he uses it in a weaker state, then he uses it in its strongest state but with the chart, and then finally he's become so powerful that he uses it in a fully powered state with no incantation whatsoever. And then the first Hado to not be numbered is Mushi-Kuidama, an extremely fast ball of energy that's capable of punching a hole through a wall. So yeah, not bad at all for the Soul Society arc, but now we need to see which sub-arc of the Arrancar arc comes out on top. I have a feeling it's probably going to be the same as last time. But kickstarting the Hado debuts of the Arrancar arc, we have Hado 54, Hien appearing in the White Invasion segment. The caster slings a bolt of purple energy from their hand at the target, and upon making contact, the energy completely incinerates the target, erasing it from existence with its all-consuming flame. Now, it took us all the way until the Hueco Mundo arc to finally get Hado number 1, but here we are. Hado number 1, Sho, simply blasts the target a few feet away from the wielder with a relatively weak amount of force. And then we have Hado 73, originally 63 before the data books amended it. Soren Sokatsui is essentially 2 Sokatsui fused into one blast. The wielder gathers reams of blue energy into their hands before thrusting it towards their intended target, sending a massive blast of icy blue power towards their foe. Moving into Turn Back the Pendulum, there is a moment where Rose seemingly blasts Kensei with an unnamed, unnumbered Kido. It's literally just an energy blast, so it could reasonably be anything. In terms of actual Kido that we can count on this list, there's only one here, but it's absolutely a special one. One of the most explosive Hado in the series, Hado 88 Hiryu Gekizoku Shinten Raiho, is an extremely powerful spell only wielded by the most capable of Kido practitioners. Outstretching their arm like a cannon, clasping onto it with their free hand to support it, the caster unleashes an unbelievable torrent of energy at their target. The blast is a terrifying mix of spiritual and electrical energy, and upon making contact it results in a gargantuan explosion. That being said, Danku does still manage to shut it down. And so we move on to the fake Karakura Town arc, and again, this is a big one, though not quite as crazy as it was for Bakudo. We begin with Hado 11 Suzuri Raiden. The wielder generates a simple yet potent electrical current which can travel through objects to zap their target. Now, this next one is another slightly strange one. Hinamori uses Hado 12 Fushibi as part of her intricate explosive net with which she manages to wound the Tre Bestia. It's difficult to know exactly what part of this is Fushibi as she ignites the net with Tobiyume, but considering the name of the spell translates to Hidden Flame, it's possible it's the netting itself, though I'm not sure why she needed to mix it with Shakuho when Tobiyume is already explosive. Either way, it's in there somewhere. Maybe the net is Fushibi and the net is fiery, but it needs to be ignited, which is why she fused it with Shakuho and then set it alight with Tobiyume. It's pretty convoluted, though it is quite effective. The third of the coloured flame trio, Hado 32 Oka-sen, fires a golden wave of fire at the target. However, unlike both Shakuho and Sakatsui, Oka-sen seems to be a wider attack, perhaps with a shorter range, although it's difficult to say. Hado 58, Tenran debuting in chapter 323, conjures a whirling tornado in front of the caster which spirals horizontally towards its target. In the source material, we see the tornado is conjured via spinning a levitating Zanpakuto, creating the twirling, twisting cone effect of energy. And already we're at another Hado in the 90s with Hado 91, Senju Koten Taiho. The wielder generates a mass of searing pink missiles of energy around them in a wide formation before firing them all at their target, the blasts slamming into the victim all at once in a massive explosion of light. Hado 96 Ito Kaso is a forbidden sacrificial spell that requires the wielder to use their own body as a catalyst. Upon activation of the spell, Yamamoto's left arm cracked open, a brilliant red light emerging from within, before an enormous column of red flame exploded into life. The column, which takes the shape of a katana's tip, is strong enough to incinerate everything in its vicinity, decimating all the buildings around it. Due to using this power, Yamamoto lost his left arm entirely. It's just a shame that presumably because Aizen was fused with the Hogyoku at the time, he emerged from it relatively unscathed. And so now we move on to the Hado of the Fake Karakura Town arc that don't have numbered classification, and while Hachi's standing ovation spell could be mistaken for a Bakudo due to the fact it generates blue barriers around the heads of its enemies, it's quite clearly designed for offense, and the spell itself seems to be initiated by Hachi clapping his hands, hence the name, so it's difficult to gauge exactly how important the barriers are. But once Hachi claps his hands together, the barriers change colour, decapitating his enemies. The final Hado to debut without a number in the Fake Karakura Town battle is Kisuke Urahara's modified version of Hado 4 Byakurai, now called Jugeki Byakurai. It still fires a bolt of energy like before, but now that energy has the appearance of a strike from Urahara's own Zanpakuto, Benihime. Alright, so that's all the Hado debuts in the Rankar arc. I really hope I haven't missed anything at this point. It's highly possible, but I'm thinking this is pretty comprehensive so far. But once again, the Lost Agent and the first Quincy invasion don't have anything to offer us here, so we have to move straight on to the second Quincy invasion. The first new Hado debut we get since the Fake Karakura Town battle comes when Yumichika uses Hado 57 Daichi Tenyo in his battle against Giselle and Bambietta. Upon activation, chunks of rock and stone from the surrounding area begin to levitate before being flung towards the target. I always thought it was interesting that Yumichika just casually uses this Kido, despite the fact he's in the 11th division and the fact that Ikkaku is right there fighting alongside him. Now, the last one from the second invasion is a cool one, as it's the only secret Hado we get to see, being Secret Hado number 3, Teppu Satsu, which is unleashed by Ichibei Hyosabe during his titanic battle with Yūhabuk. The caster chops the air with their hand, which creates a bulbous emerald wave of swirling energy, which then coalesces to take the form of a massive dragon's head. That dragon then blows a powerful gust of wind from its mouth, strong enough to completely shatter Yūhabuk's own Blutvein Anhaben. And then moving on, hey, we actually have some new spells debuting in the Wahrwelt arc. The first numbered Hado here is Hado 78, Zangarin. To activate the spell, Kyoraku places the tips of his blades together before scraping them and swinging them apart outwards, generating a spiked ring of energy around him, which then collides with the target in a huge blast. And the final numbered Hado to debut in the series, fittingly, is perhaps the strongest of them all, Hado 99, Goryu Tenmetsu, appearing in chapter 683. The spell is activated by making a swiping motion upwards with your hand, at which point the ground beneath the user's feet ruptures and quakes, transforming the landscape as 5 colossal dragons made of a billowing, flaming Reiatsu rise up from the earth itself like an immense tidal wave. According to Can't For Your Own World, this is a forbidden spell, as it draws on the spiritual energy of its own surroundings to help continually increase its strength. And then the only Hado to debut without a number in Wahrwelt is Hachi's, he's back again, Chocolate Bar Slider. Hachi summons a strip of 5 three-dimensional rectangular objects made of energy between his hands before driving them all into his enemy, bombarding them with a furious force. So, those are all the Kido spells in the source material that can be readily classified as either Bakudo or Hado, but there's a few more left to take a look at, and these last few are some of the slightly more ethereal powers in Bleach. In the Soul Society arc, we get to see Kagizaki, which is a spell initiated by Kukaku Shiba to help launch the Flower Crane Cannon. Now, this spell is fairly unique. To achieve the desired outcome, it needs 2 casters reciting incantations at once. The first caster surrounds the cannon with ceremonial ropes and a large black marking around the base before jamming a sword into a central platform to begin the incantation. After wrapping their arm in bindings, the practitioner's arm is then set ablaze before they slam their fist down onto the ground again, igniting the inky black ring around the cannon's base. As the flames meet in the middle and return to the wielder, they divert the flames back to the cannon itself, destroying the ropes and unleashing the cannon, completing the ritual. The second practitioner chants a different incantation from inside the cannonball as the second half of the spell, helping to steady the cannonball and determine both its speed and trajectory as it flies through the air. Meanwhile, Sentan Hakuja is an interesting Kido in that it's never seen again in the source material, I don't think, but it seems very useful for movement. The targets are surrounded by a long white cloth which coils around them before constricting and teleporting them to another location. When we get to the Rankar arc, we see another traversal spell, which is Kei Kaigi, which enables Kisuke Urahara to open a doorway that connects both the human world and Hueco Mundo via the Garganta after he chants the incantation. Up next, as we arrive in Turn Back the Pendulum, we have Noren Mekuri, which is a simple Kido that enables the user to dispel illusory effects. Something you think would be very useful against Kyoka Suigetsu, but maybe it has a limit to what it can reasonably achieve. Either way, Shinji uses it to remove Aizen's own Kyoko spell, revealing him once more. Now we reach some of the most powerful spells in the series, both performed by former Kido Corps Captain Tessai Tsukubishi, and both forbidden. The first spell is Jikan Teishi, which can be used to freeze time. By clasping their hands together and then pulling them apart again, the caster creates a block of brilliant lime green light, which then encompasses a given area and freezes all time within it. The second forbidden spell cast by Tessai is Kukan Tenai, which is combined with Jikan Teshi to move space from one place to another. These two spells, which manipulate time and space, see Tessai condemned to a life sentence in the Great Underground Prison's third level of Shugo. When we get to the fake Karakura town, we see a spell called Goyogai, which is a unique spell in that it's probably closest to a Bakudo, but it seems designed to hold things in stasis. It's not quite a healing spell either, it's somewhere in between. It creates a barrier around the target, keeping that person in a form of suspended animation and enabling them to stave off death even for a time. This is how Hachi managed to keep Hiyori alive even when she was missing the bottom half of her body until Unohana arrived on the scene. And then when we get to the first Quincy invasion, during her battle with Kenpachi Zaraki, Yachiru Unohana uses an unnamed healing spell to fix her injuries received as a result of a massive direct slash from Zaraki himself. I was umming and ahhing about even bothering including reviewing this one, as there have been a few healing spells, Kido spells used throughout the series, but they often go completely unrecognised. They never get a name or a classification or anything like that. It's generally just someone holding their hands over an injured body and a light kind of comes out. But this one's kind of interesting, I thought, as the spell takes the form of an elastic-like web, which Unohana then holds close to her injury to kind of heal herself on the fly. But that's all of them, or at least I hope it is anyway. And honestly, just looking back at the list, it's no surprise people always wanted to see more from Kido as an element in Bleach. It's always so much fun when it appears, and it's cool seeing Kubo flex his creativity in ways that aren't restricted to Zanpakuto or similar powers. A more conventional magic system allows him to go really crazy. And while I'm happy that we got to see quite a lot of spells, and it definitely felt like Kubo was giving us something we specifically wanted to see by revealing Hado 99 at the very last minute, I would be absolutely up for more insight into Kido and the Kido core in general. But that's it for the video, the first big video on the channel for Kido, at least I think anyway. I really hope you enjoyed it. Again, I appreciate it's quite a long one, but I wanted to start with a comprehensive breakdown, an exhaustive list of every Kido spell I think that we get to see during the source material. But now I'm about to lose my voice, so let me know in the comments below what's your favourite Kido spell of the lot, what's your favourite Hado, and what's your favourite Bakudo. Do let me know in the comments down below. Make sure to hit subscribe if you haven't done already, give the video a thumbs up if you enjoyed it, and until next time I'll catch you later, and I'll see you then.